All right, so next up on our agenda, I want to introduce another piece of functionality that is somewhat common in a lot of typical web applications, especially within corporations, and that is the ability to upload a file. So what we're going to do first of all is modify our application to allow us to upload a photo for our users, okay? Now, I'm not saying it's super common to upload photos specifically, especially for corporate web applications, but this will be a fair excuse for us to at least implement the ability to upload any kind of file at all, okay? But we'll be working with photos. Since we're working with a people database anyway, might as well be able to upload a photo of a person, all right? So let's get started. So I think the way we'd want this to work is that we've already got this form here where we can create a person. And what I'm envisioning is simply adding an additional field to the form where we can select a file from our file system to upload. And then when we save the person, all of the regular data plus that file will be sent to the backend, which is our Java code. And then we can do something with it there. All right. So before we get into what we're exactly going to do with those files, let's first just acknowledge that probably we'll have to modify our person class to support an additional field. Okay. So let's jump into the person class and see what we've got here. So let me make a little room. Okay, so here's our person class. So yeah, I think this can be as easy as simply adding another field. Now you might be wondering, what should the data type for this field be? And there are multiple ways that we could do this, but the way that we're going to do it for now and probably forever is that our person domain model class is simply going to hold a reference to the file name. Okay, so we won't actually put the file in instances of a person. We could do that, but I will explain a little bit later why I'm not super crazy about doing that. Okay, so that makes it even easier though. So we'll just have a string. And we can say something like photo file name, maybe. And I'm not going to bother with any validation rules for this, since this will be coming from a file that you would pick from within the browser. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have validation in real life, but for our little toy application here, I'm not too worried about it. And you now know how to put that kind of validation on there yourself if you really feel that you need to. All right, so that's what we need there. And then let's jump back into our template. And so now we can add the field down here, okay? And I suppose we can just add it right underneath the salary field. Now we can jump over into Bootstrap and see if Bootstrap offers any nicer looking file upload widgets or something like that. And maybe I will just come up here to the search box and type in upload. Nope. How about file? There we go. File input right there. Form controls file input. Perfect. Okay, so these are the somewhat visually customized file input widgets that they are providing. They've got a really large one. I guess I will just go with this default one. Notice though that they've got both a default and then a multiple files input example. So if you wanted to be allowed to upload multiple files in one go, I guess you could use that one. I don't think we're going to need that right now, if ever. But this first one looks like a good candidate to me, and that should correspond to everything in this div here. So I am going to just copy that. All right, and then I will come over here and I will simply paste it right underneath the salary field that we already have, okay? And then jump back over here to the page, and let's see here. Let's go ahead and just reload and just see how that looks first before we go any further. Oh yeah, and now I've got a lot of things broken here because I forgot about this constructor thing. I added a new field, and so over here in the, where are we now? This is the person data loader class. Now all of this code here is broken. Now, interestingly, I mean, we're not even using this data loader anymore. So, I'm kind of thinking of not trying to fix this and just comment that all out, just to be kind of lazy and quick about it. But obviously, if we wanted to, we could fix this by simply passing in perhaps a null for that new parameter. We could likely do something like that, but I don't want to even bother with that. So I'm just going to reload. Okay, and so the browser has updated, and there's our new field. Now we need to kind of customize it somewhat, but that's looking like we're on the right page. So no pun intended. All right, so go back over to the template, and now we can customize this field a bit. Let me make some more room here. So let's see here. So let's rename this the field label to photo file, maybe. All right, and let's see, that ID there is, let's change the ID here and here in the for to, what did I name it in the class? Photo file name, I think. And let me copy that, because then I'm going to have a Thymeleaf ID as well. Th field equals star and then photo file name, like so. All right, and let me refresh again. Okay, and so if I come down here right now and just select, all right, there we go. So I've made a new folder where I've downloaded a bunch of free images of people. And so I'm in my people folder here, and this is all looking just fine. So that much works at least. Now, let's go ahead and actually select the person, in fact. And I will even fill this out, and I'll even use the model's name there, I guess. Stefanchik, I guess. And I will make up a date, 1/1/1980. And STEF at photos.com with a salary of 50,000. Okay. And let's go ahead and save this person. Okay, so we got the person created. Now we may have virtually no idea if the photo file name actually got sent over, because we have no feedback over here. Now we can temporarily add that field to the table also, so that we can see if we've got that data. So let's see, I guess I'm going to add it right after the salary for now, at least. So let's go to the header of our table, and I will just duplicate the salary header column, and then add another one for photo. And then down here where we have the salary data cell, I will duplicate again, and now we will refer to photo file name, like so. And we don't need the double curly braces for that one, because we're not formatting it or anything. And let's just see if this works like this. Yeah, okay. So this is what the browser sent to the back end. Just this string of the actual file name itself, okay? So that's part of what we need, but obviously what we really want is the actual file, which you can think of it as a series of bytes, okay? It's binary data, okay? It's not text, but it's actually binary data that we are really wanting. And so right now, our application is not technically configured to send the actual binary data that comprises the photo. All it's currently sending is just this string of the file name itself, okay? So we need to figure out, how can we get our hands on the actual bytes, right? The actual binary data that comprises that photo. So we'll actually need a few things to make that work. First off, if we come down here to our form, the person form here, we're gonna have to change one little thing about how this form is configured to work. So if we go to the form element itself right here, there's an additional argument that we can specify on the form to tell it how we want it to transmit data. So you will recall that whenever the web page is submitting a request back to the back end and we have form data, that data is being encoded essentially as just a text string of key value pairs, right? So we'd have the first name field equals, and then the value that's in it, and then an ampersand, and then the last name field according to its ID, which is last name, and then an equals, and then whatever value we put in there, and then another ampersand to separate out each of the fields, and all of that will be concatenated into one text string, okay? So currently, that's still happening even for this photo file field here. We've just got another field in that text string with the photo file name ID equals, and then whatever the name of the file is, okay? And all of that's being concatenated and sent over. And then Spring is parsing out that string and then populating each of the fields of our person object with the values that came back from these key value pairs. So it's really, really simplistic, very, very straightforward, okay? And the request itself, just as a quick reminder, is really just a text file that has a bunch of headers. One of those headers was like the accept language that we've looked at a few times here, which is where we're getting the locale information, and then a bunch of other headers that we're not really paying a lot of attention to for the most part. The very first part of that header, though, will say like the HTTP method type, which is usually a GET, although when we're submitting the form, it's a POST because we configured our form to do a POST. Where was that? Right there, right? So it'll say POST, and then the name of the resource, which in our case is /people, right? And all of those headers, and then one blank line. And then on the next line will be the so-called payload or the body of the request, which in our case currently just contains those key value pairs all concatenated together, okay? So that's what we're normally getting. However, if we want to send binary data, like a file upload with all of its data, we need to use a different format to send that data. And specifically what we want to use in that case is called a multi-part format, okay? And the way we can get that to happen is with a simple additional attribute on the form element here. So what we can do here is I can simply do a control space, and I can come down here to this attribute enc type. And then I can choose an explicit encoding type. So right now, the default encode type is actually this one here, application x www form URL encoded, okay? So when we're seeing those key value pairs with the ampersands and all of that, that's just what we call URL encoding. It's the same as what we could have actually put right up here in the URL itself. There's really no difference, except that instead of it being on the URL, it's in the body of the request, okay? So that's what we're getting by default. But if we want to be able to transmit binary data in that request, along with all the rest of it, we need to use this multi-part form data. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to still be sort of a text file that gets sent across, but instead of one line, in our case, of key value pairs all on one line, each key and value will now be separated out on their own lines. And then there will be a little extra stuff to basically indicate the boundary between each key value pair, okay? And the reason for that is because then it allows for an unspecified amount of additional data for a value, which in this case would be all of the binary bytes of the image that we're uploading, okay? Because you don't know how long that's going to be. So it may need plenty of space, okay? So the multi-part encoding scheme allows for that. And you can just send a lot of different data. You can even send multiple files all in one request with this approach, okay? So anyway, we're going to select multi-part form data like so. And so that will enable us to upload not only the file name, but the actual file data itself. However, it's not quite that simple. That's just one step. But then we will also need to jump over to the controller and set the controller up to actually be able to receive this data, okay? So currently, our post mapping is calling the save person method, and Spring is automatically validating the key value pair data from the form. And then if it's all valid, and then binding whatever it can into an instance of a person. And then any existing errors will go into the errors, right? So here's a question. what is Spring going to do with this binary data? Okay, first off, let's talk about what binary data could even look like in Java. Okay, so we know that the file name itself can be represented as a string because it's just text, right? But binary data, you can really think of it as an array of bytes. And in fact, in Java, oftentimes binary data is represented as an array of bytes, okay? Because virtually any computer data can be decomposed down to a bunch of bytes, essentially, all right? And so that's just a very generic way that you can represent just about anything in Java or in any other computer language for that matter, okay? So where could these bytes go? We currently are not modeling any place to hold on to an array of bytes, okay? So we need some kind of a model that can receive this array of bytes so that we can then do something with it. So the way we can do that, and I'm not saying this is the only way, but this is a pretty easy way, I think, to do this, is that we can actually just add in another field here, and we can tell Spring to explicitly look for the photo file name parameter that's coming in and on the request and map its binary data to a specific parameter in our method, okay? So we can do that by adding an @request_param annotation, like so. And then we can introduce another parameter here. Now, Spring actually has a special parameter that is intended to represent files that are being uploaded. And if you use this specific Spring data type, then it's pretty easy to work with files once you receive them. And so that's what we're actually going to use here. And I've never tried this, but I think we could also use a byte array if we wanted to. I think so, but we're not going to bother with that in case any of you were wondering, and you are free to try that out. But let's just cut to the chase in the interest of time, okay? So we're going to use a special Spring data type, which is called multi-part file. And then we will name this parameter photo file name. So we'll have it match what the parameter is called from the incoming request itself. All right, photo file name. So if we just do that, that should enable Spring to parse out the binary data of that incoming file and place it inside of that photo file name variable, okay? And next thing we can do for right now, just to kind of verify that we're even on the right track, let's go ahead and just output that variable. Now this data type, multi-part file, actually is an object, obviously, and it has methods on it. And so we can actually look at some of the methods. So there are the bytes right there, by the way. Those are the bytes, and look at that. You've got an array of bytes. So that just proves the fact that fundamentally, any binary data that we're receiving really can be boiled down into just an array of bytes. But we can also do something like get the name of the file or the original file name of the file. So let's grab the original file name, okay? And we'll just print that out. By the way, I really need to hurry up and introduce you guys to a proper way of kind of debugging your code with these outputs and stuff. It's actually kind of bad to embed system.out.printlines. There's a much better way called logging. And I will introduce just a tiny bit of it right now because this is so bad and I really shouldn't have let it go this long. So here's what we'll do real quick. Go to the very top of the class there and we're going to do a @log4j2. So this is a Lombok annotation and it enables really easy logging. I don't know that I'm even going to bother to explain a whole lot of how it's working but it's good stuff. And then what we will do is let's just search for system.out.println. So I'm going to select that system.out.println, just that bit there, and then do a Command R to do a search and replace, and tab down once, and then I will replace that with, log.info, I guess, for now. Anything is better than what I'm currently doing there. All right, so I just replaced all the places in this class where I had a system.out.println. Those have all been replaced with log.info, okay? All right, so that will still result in that information being printed out to the console essentially, but the logging thing here can be turned on and off, because typically in a real production application like that's live and being used by a bunch of people, you might not want just every single thing in the universe that you ever were trying to print out to always print out. Some of that is kind of like just for testing purposes, which is pretty much what we're doing right here. But I just kind of want to show you this because I feel bad. Some of you might stop watching the rest of my videos and just like go off and say like, oh, I know how to do everything now. And like you're just constantly using system.out.println, and that would be bad. Okay, so enough about that for right now. All right, I'll try to get back to that. And if I don't, you'll catch it in my next actual spring course, right? You'll see me again in the spring course, I hope, right? Okay, good. All right, okay. So one other thing too, let's see if we can get the size of the file. I think we'll have access to that. Yep, there it is, get size. Yeah, let's get that also. And you know what, I should probably kind of like state what these things are now. File, I guess this file name is fine. File name plus space, and I'm just going to concatenate with a plus here because I'm doing really simple stuff for now. And file size plus. All right, cool. That way, when we see this information printed out, we can actually kind of understand what it is. All right, so let's reload. Okay, I think we are reloaded. And let's add another person. So I'm going to start down here with the file uploader again, because I got the name of the person from here. It's hard for me to come up with these names. So I'm just going to pick that second person now, and that is Albert Dera. Okay, so here we go. Albert, D-E-R-A, and I will do 2/2/1990. And adra at photos.com and 45,000. All right, and I'm gonna hit enter. Ooh, look at that. Okay, now got an issue here, and I see right away, I just happen to see this bit right there, maximum upload size exceeded. All right, and this is good. So what's happening here is the file that I just tried to upload is exceeding the default upload file size that is currently configured for my Spring web application. And apparently the maximum permitted size is currently whatever this number is. How many? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 1 meg. It looks like 1 meg, 1,048,576 bytes. So that's 1 meg. That is the max. So what can we do about that? It's easy. So we can actually just override that, and to do so, all we need to do is jump into the application.properties file right here, and there will be another property that allows us to control the max upload file size, or whatever they're calling it. And again, let me just remind you, you don't have to memorize these things necessarily, at least not like in detail. You can just jump into the Spring Boot data properties documentation here. Okay, and probably the easiest way to find this particular parameter that we're looking for is to search for the word multi-part. Okay, so you know that you had to use the multi-part file type. So if you come over here and just search for multi-part, there we go. We're in the neighborhood here. And let's see, we've got multi-part file size threshold, max file size. That looks like a winner chicken dinner right there. So I would copy that, come over here, paste that in, and then set that to something else. Now, when you take my Spring course and I go into way more detail on Spring and everything, you will learn what I'm about to tell you right now. So I guess you're about to learn it now. If you just don't want to have a max file size at all, which is what I'm going to do for right now, you can just set this value to -1. That just tells it, don't care, just blow up my computer with some idiot who tried to upload a 1 terabyte file. I don't care. Obviously, you should care about that, but for right now, I'm just going to do the easy thing and set this to -1. But you could explicitly set this to whatever value you want. So currently, just keep in mind, the default was 1 meg, right? 1 meg. All right, and then I will jump back over to the web application window here, and then I will reload. All right, so let's try adding another person. So again, I will come down here and I will select I'm going to start by selecting a person so that I can get a name. So we'll do the second person here, Albert Dera. All right, so Albert, D-E-R-A, and I will just do a date of, I don't know, 1990. And A-D-E-R-A at photos.com, that's fine. And a salary of $35,000. Okay, and let's add Albert. All right, so let's see here. So notice now, Albert isn't showing up in here, and we've got all of that data still here, except for that file name. We've got all of that. So what is going on? So I think we have to assume that there are errors here, okay? I think that's what we should assume. But how can we confirm that? Well, I think the easiest thing we can probably do is just log out the value of this errors here. So let's do that. Now I'm going to keep things simple for now and just keep using this info method, but just know that there are actually a lot of methods that we could use to log information out. But then we'd need to configure things we'd need to also do some configurations to say like which values from which of these methods do we want to actually be able to see, and I don't want to get into all of that. So we're just going to keep it simple and use info for now. And yeah, we'll just do the errors, although I probably should at least label that errors plus. Okay, something like that. All right, so now if we try this again, well, let me reload. Let's reload. Okay. Let's see if that already, oh yeah, and we got it already because the request was just kind of replayed, okay? Yeah, okay, so here's our errors. I forgot to put a space there. Let's see. So one error, and it looks like it, yeah, there it is. Okay, field error in object person on field photo file name, rejected value. Let's see, there's a whole lot of stuff here. Let me go all the way to the end of it. That might actually be easier. No matching editors or conversion strategy found for the photo file name string. Okay, yeah, so I think I can already understand what's happening here. So it's referring to this multi-part data that came in from the request. And it looks like what it tried to do is it tried to take the multi-part data from the request and bind that to the photo file name field of our person class. So let me just remind you what we're saying here. So here's the person class, and Spring will try to take all of the key value pairs that are existing on the incoming request and match them up as best as it can. So one of those key value pairs is labeled photo file name. And our person class now has a field called photo file name of type string. All right. In addition to the fact that we also have a field here, a parameter here called photo file name as well of type multipart. So what's happening is that Spring is having no trouble extracting the multipart file name data from the request and binding it to this parameter. That's just fine because the data itself is of type multipart file name, so to speak, and so that matches up really perfectly here. However, it also thinks that it needs to bind that same data to this field here. However, this is a string, and it doesn't know now how to take that binary data that it's in the request and turn it into a string. It just doesn't know what to do with it, okay? What do you think we could do to solve this problem where Spring wants to bind request parameter data? It's technically, I guess, not really a parameter anymore because now it's like this multi-part data. But anyway, it's trying to bind this data of one type in the request to a field of another type string. Can you think of what we can do to solve this problem? Okay, did you come up with it? You've already learned how to solve this kind of problem before. So you could use a formatter. Remember when we created a formatter for displaying the salaries and even for the dates of birth? Although now we're not using that formatter here in the table because we're doing a Thymeleaf thing, but the formatter class still exists. So let me open up the project pane here, and you can see here we've got these two formatters. We've got a big decimal formatter and a locale date formatter, okay? So these classes are registered with Spring by putting this @component annotation on it, and then they implement the formatter interface, which is generic so that we can specify what the data type is that we are talking about converting. Now, formatters specifically are designed to convert from some data type to a string and from a string to a data type, okay? So we can use a formatter perfectly for this. Now, I don't remember if I mentioned it, but Spring has a very similar way of doing conversions that don't necessarily involve going from a thing to a string and a string to a thing. If you just want to go from one thing to another thing, for example, you can do something almost identical to this, except instead of implementing formatter, you would implement converter. And then instead of passing in one generic parameter, you'd pass in two generic parameters, which would be the two data types, okay? But if you're just doing something to string and then string to something, then you can just use a formatter, and that is all we're doing here. So all we need to do is create another formatter here. So I'm going to highlight the formatter package there, and then I'm going to do a new Java class, and we will call this multi-part file formatter because that's what it's going to work with. All right, and yes, I will add that to my get stuff, which you won't have, probably. And then I will say this implements formatter, and then the generic type will be multi-part file. All right, and then we will let the, oh, by the way, be careful here because the formatter itself is called multi-part file formatter. So be careful and don't accidentally set your generic type to multi-part file formatter. Okay, don't do that. All right, so you want multi-part file. And then we will let the IDE generate our methods here. And so down here, if we are receiving a multi-part file from the request and we need to somehow turn that into a string representation that can be stored in the person instance, then all we need to do is call object.get, and then we can do something like get original file name, right? Like so. Now, honestly, I'm not even sure that the reverse case would ever be necessary. So I think I'm going to leave that null for now, okay? And then the last thing we need to do is to annotate this as a component so that Spring will know about it. All right, and then let's refresh or reload. Hey, and look at that. As soon as we did that, the request that the browser already really had kind of queued up, if you want to think of it in this way, went ahead and refreshed the browser, which caused that request to be resent. And now Spring was able to figure out what to do. Yep. And so there's our new person. Now, so we are now getting, let me jump back over to the controller. So we now are receiving the actual binary data of the file, but we're not doing anything with it other than just saying, yep, I got it, and here's the file name, and here's the size, but we're not actually like doing anything with it. So I think we need to stop here on this lesson, and in the next lesson, we will actually figure out, okay, now what can we really do with this file? Because I think what we want to do is we want to take that file, the photo file, and store it somewhere, right? That's what we probably need to be doing, okay? So let's do that in the next lesson. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content and you'd like to help me out, there are several ways you could do that. First, you can always click the like and subscribe. That'll help me out a lot. Additionally, another way you can help me out is to check the link in the description below. That'll link you to my website where you can find additional courses. And finally, for those of you who might be interested in starting a new career as a professional software developer, I offer a free PDF guide that will detail exactly how you can get started in this field with no college degree and no prior experience. All you need to do is click on the link in the description below. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.